those high degrees of proximity. Okay, let's try and bubble together all of the sorts of things we've said in a nearshore value proposition. So there's a time zone proximity issue. We just talked a fair amount of that, but to recap, it allows for rapid Q&A in minutes, in hours, in seconds, every day that we're working. The requirement solicitation cycle can be very quick. A question can be asked a minute or two later, a resolution can be found. The same with review cycles of any artifacts, project reviews, management reviews, technical reviews, etc. And obviously business meetings from a virtual point of view can take place in everybody's time zone. Travel proximity, when face-to-face meetings are required, literally they're now just a few hours away, they're not several days away. Low cost of travel, minimal jet lag and wear and tear on the body, very minimal, making it a much more acceptable, enjoyable experience to move. Culture proximity. And this is an issue, we'll talk a little bit more about the East-West issue, but I'm mostly concerned here that the cultures of nearshore tend to be very close to the center. So in the U.S.-centric sense, the cultures of Canada and or Mexico are very close. Therefore, the styles of communication, the behavioral models, the decision-making capabilities are very, very close to each other. That making the nearshore solution a far more viable solution than very disparate cultures half a year away. Okay, let's move on a bit to cultural alignment. A few comments here. First comment I'd like to make is really Asians and Westerners think very differently about the world, and one needs to understand that. To give one an example, if you take China as an example, they think the world is a circle. We think the world is a line. The Chinese believe in constant change, but with things always moving back to some prior state. They pay attention to a wide range of events. They search for relationships between things, and in particular, relationships with people. And they think that they can't understand the part without understanding the whole. Now, contrast that with a Westerner's view of life, much simpler, more deterministic world. They focus on salient objects, people, instead of large picture. They think that they can control events because they know the rules that govern the behavior of the objects. I think with those two descriptions, you might well be able to see quite an intellectual difference between the way both parties think. That needs to be understood. It's a joy to see both sides, but it has to be understood and it has to be factored in to one's relationships. These differences of the way things are viewed and other issues generate quite significantly different business cultures in terms of styles of leadership and business practices, and of course are underpinned or foundationally supported by national cultural activities, different behaviors, the value of time. In India, I was amazed and paradoxically amazed with the issue that if you don't do it today, no worry, we do it tomorrow. If you don't do it tomorrow, no worry, we do it next week. Oh, if we don't do it this life, no worry, we'll do it in another one. And that value permeates a lot of the way things get done. The paradox there is in my practice in India, we delivered on-time delivery statistics at 95 to 96% on-time delivery of all deliverables to customers, which paradoxically runs in the face of their intrinsic value of time. But at the detailed level, on a day-to-day interaction, the value of time is quite different and very frustrating, and therefore leads to different motivations as to why people do things and what will happen. So I think the whole issue of culture is it needs to be studied as part of doing business with different cultures. It needs to be embedded in your practice. There's learning on both sides, and if you don't both learn, then you're going to be unsuccessful in your outsourcing activities. Moving off of that, some tips on successful outsourcing. And I think these come as a conclusion from many of the things we've said before. One needs to know oneself, and one needs to know one's outsourcing partner. We have strengths, they have strengths. We have weaknesses, they have weaknesses. We need to build a plan together to use both of those sets of behaviors for great advantage. This is really a strategic relationship. You don't go into this lightly. A lot of investment in time, knowledge, a lot of transfer of domain knowledge, a lot of technical knowledge gets transferred in both directions. That cannot be done as a casual activity. It must be strategic to your business. You must be present at the outsourcing site regularly. If you're not there, part of their team, and if they don't see them being part of your team, that leads to an isolation, reduces productivity, lack of ownership on both sides, and a resulting negative experience in that whole process. There's a learning curve. There's always a learning curve. There are no free lunches. We need to plan for it. There's learning. You need to learn their way of doing business. They need to learn yours. Together, you need to plan for that. You need to plan for that learning curve. There will be a productivity impact. Understanding the cultural differences, we said, it's not a one-way street. Our culture probably seems as strange to them as theirs seems strange to us. So we need to embrace both of those differences and work together to solve those problems. And then we need to look for service leadership. You're looking for companies that are going to be making you successful, understand that relationship, understand what's important, know their value, know your value, and work in a really seamless partnership towards the goal. So those sort of are successful tips on outsourcing that I'm going to leave you with here. Now moving on, I have some concluding comments. Okay. So costs in India and China, and in fact in almost all the traditional outsourcing locations, are rising. They're rising at a greater rate than the costs are rising locally. So whatever your cost of service in outsourcing today is, it's going to rise. All right? The issue is just how fast and how much. Great outsourcers are available everywhere. Over the past 20 years, there have been many opportunities to learn from each other. Great capability is available almost in every country you go to. So that is not a distinctive issue further. Speed is of the essence, so time proximity is becoming the winning value proposition. I think here we're starting to see significant differentiation between distant versus proximate locations. Customer service level leadership is becoming a valuable distinction among suppliers, and now we move Nearshore in Mexico is a very viable solution. Cultural and time zone similarities at a very stable place. Mexico, lower costs at a stable price over our northern boundary partner, and there are excellent developers in Mexico. Now, in going to Mexico this time, as Eric introduced, we're building a world-class software development facility there. It's not my first time into Mexico. As part of the Global Software Group, we had established a sizable software development capability in Puebla, and find that the capability of the engineers coming out of Mexico are absolutely no different than the capability of engineers coming out of any of the other locations. So it's not a surprise. You get great people there. They're very dedicated. They're very tenacious. They're eager to learn and eager to provide satisfaction to their customers. There is, as I found from my experience, no difference between them and developers elsewhere in the world. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Eric, who will perform a few concluding remarks. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Roger. Really appreciate both your time. Right now, what we're doing is we're putting together some of the questions that have been sent in, and I want to thank everyone for attending. And so while those questions are being put together so they can be given to Roger, who's going to come on in just a minute, and he'll actually answer all those and give you some insights as to based on what you were looking for. But in the couple of minutes that we have, let me give you a little bit of a brief background around Tampa development. We are headquartered here in Tempe, Arizona, which is part of Phoenix. We built this center in Hermosillo, which is the most northern state in Mexico, so this borders Arizona. I will tell you a short story. About 4 years ago now, we actually had an engagement that we had landed, and we outsourced it, of course, to India, and it was really a horrific problem. We had struggles all along with time zone issues. The customer, I know this is hard to believe, but the customer kept changing his requirements. And so every time there was a change, it would not take hours, it would take days. And I mean literally just days, because the communication gap was so large and so long. And our engineers in India kept asking, why are we making this change, not understanding. Well, it's because they could never be in a dialogue with us unless you were willing to do 4 o'clock in the morning calls. So it was quite a struggle. We actually had to pull the project back. And when we did, we finished it here. And we said, geez, there must be a better way to do this. And what we found out is that the Mexican government has been investing for 15 years now into the software development industry. And we were not aware of that, and we went down expecting to see what is known as maquiladoras, which are manufacturing facilities, but instead we found software factories.